So friends, we begin with this novel Pride and Prejudice, written by Jane Austen in the second decade of the 19th century, and I say that the novel of the title of the novel reflects the male preference for imposing their writ on women. So whatever is their wish, whatever their ideas are, those ideas would be there to control women's behavior, since they control them, men, and their interests. But the words also enable, the words Pride and Prejudice in the novel, they also enable the reader to see the social reality from a new angle, and that is to be kept in mind. And that new angle wasn't there earlier, and naturally the structure of the family in the 19th century came into focus, because of which women became aware of their conditions in life. Now, another thing that I would like to say about this novel is that it is comic in nature. Literature generally is sentimental, is emotional. It expresses pain. It also contains ideas, and there are examples of comedy also in it. Now, what is comic about the novel? This question is not as easy as it may sound. Comedy doesn't mean laughter alone. Of course, there is laughter, but there is a play upon words. You use a word in one sense, and the other person understands it in another. Who is right? The person who understands, or the person who says it? Or the person who says it, did that person also realize that there could be two or three meanings of the same sentence? And when the other person starts thinking about the word use of another person, then that in a way generates intellectual energy in the mind of the listener. Now, this energy itself is comic. Comic not in the sense that it gives you laughter, it makes you laugh. It is comic in the sense that the person starts thinking, and thinking makes that person powerful. And power means that you will not accept defeat. In fact, you will assert yourself. So asserting yourself means believing in life, and belief in life is comic. You don't believe in life if you are tragic. If I am tragic, then I don't believe in life. I believe more in death. So comedy means recognizing life, its importance, and believing in it. Recognizing and believing, that makes it comic. And naturally, you will laugh only when you feel strong. So this novel is comic. And imagine that in the 19th century, women were under complete control, economic and social control of men, and even then they would write, and one of them particularly, Jane Austen, she would write a comic novel, a novel that tells people to have faith in their actions, that tells people to have faith in their minds, in their mental capacity. And if the mental capacity is good, and if the other person, your adversary, the male adversary, doesn't understand, he doesn't have that mental capacity, then quietly the importance of the one who is intelligent has already come out. So that is what is the comic novel. And if you read this novel, you realize that most of the time the butt of ridicule, the targets of ridicule are men. And most of them are foolish, most of them are sentimental. Sentimental means they only go by one kind of emotion and not by another, and that the sentiment is a blinding kind of sentiment. So that is the beginning of the 19th century novel. You have the writing of Jane Austen. You have other novels by her apart from Pride and Prejudice. There is Sense and Sensibility, there is Mansfield Park, there are other novels, and in these novels she is placing the women of her time at the center. Then you have another novelist, more or less around the same time, a bit junior to Jane Austen. You have Mary Shelley, and she was born in 1797. Only 3 years belong to the 18th century, and the rest of her life, 51 years, they belong to the 19th century. And she is not witty, she is not that way humorous, she is not comic, and her main strength as a writer is that she is a philosopher, that she thinks, she uses her mind, she uses her rationality, and she also believes in the Gothic. Now, what is Gothic? There is a tradition in English literature where the Gothic is observed. So Gothic is that which is mysterious, which you can't understand. So if you write a novel about darkness, if you write a novel about the secrets of a person, if you write about a ghost, the person who died many years ago and still visits others in the memory, if you go into the realm of the memory, you have bad dreams. I have bad dreams, for instance. If that happens, then it's a Gothic novel. And you will find that women started writing Gothic novels. They were mostly romantic. Romantic, once again, not in the sense that they talk about the female beauty or the handsomeness of men and all those things. A romantic novel also means that you talk about the unknown, you talk about the mysterious, you talk about that which is magical, which doesn't happen in life, but it might happen. If you feel a threat and you don't know where the threat is coming from, then you are very close to the Gothic tradition of the novel. So Gothic novels, the romantic novels, they also became the products of the imagination of writers in the 19th century. And in particular, apart from Mary Shelley, who wrote this novel Frankenstein or the modern Prometheus, and she is using a myth, and that myth is blown up and shown to be relevant to the 19th century reader, then that draws attention. So Mary Shelley that way tells us about things that might happen, and that might happen in a manner which is threatening, and you have to be aware about the possibilities of a threat that might come sometime in life, and then if you are not prepared for it, if you are not prepared to face it, then it is going to shatter you completely. So therefore be aware that something wrong, something bad, something gigantic might happen in your life, might happen in my life, and might then unsettle me. So that is Frankenstein kind of a thing, and it's a monstrous reality, and that monstrous reality will alert us, will frighten us, and when we are frightened, then we will think of certain ways to tackle it. So that's what the novel is. It's the tradition starts with her, and then it goes and becomes a whole phenomena in the middle of the 19th century. The three Bronte sisters, they particularly use the Gothic in their novels. You must have heard of the novel Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, and you would have read a novel or heard of the novel Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, her sister. And these two novels tell us about the women characters and their imaginative selves. Their self is imaginative. They always imagine, and they imagine very creatively. They imagine characters that are cruel to others. They imagine characters that are servile to others. Wuthering Heights is a novel which uses mainly the world of dreams, and dreams are of two kinds: good dreams and bad dreams. And what are bad dreams called? They are called nightmares. So you have, Wuthering Heights is full of bad dreams. It's full of nightmares. And why is it that a person has bad dreams? This is the question that Wuthering Heights presents to us. And there is a character there, Catherine, in Wuthering Heights, and that character has always been controlled and suppressed by the male members in the family. She is not allowed to do what she wants to do. Her father is nice, but she loses her father soon, and then the power shifts into the hand. Shifts to the brother, and after that she can't do a thing of her own. She wants to play with a person who is inferior in social status, but then that is not allowed by the brother. And when she doesn't agree with him, and she is a powerful person, strong person, then she is married off. And when she is married off, then there is a male in the form of a husband who is there to control her. He is nice and good, that's a different thing, but then the patriarchy, the rule of the male in the tradition of the family and outside in society, that takes over. And the woman is all the time surrounded by threats from different sides. So that is the novel Emily Bronte wrote. She wrote only one novel, and that novel is a masterpiece. If one has to think of 10 greatest novels in the English literature, and Wuthering Heights is going to be there in it definitely. So it's that kind of a novel. It's a powerful novel. It's a novel where the hero behaves also as a villain, but you don't hate him for this, because he raises questions about the power structure in the society of the time. Charlotte Bronte writes Jane Eyre. That also is woman centric. That also is about the suppression of women. And why come? That these two novels and many others of this variety are written in the 19th century. They were not there in the 18th century in that sense. So the crux of the 19th century novel in this case is the Gothic tradition, which I explained to you earlier, and the tradition of the romantic novels, where you don't want to live in the real circumstance. You always want to go back into the world of your own making in your mind. So it is a romantic kind of fiction, and when you go into the mind, then what haunts you is not any happy moment. It is always the sad moment or the tragic moment or the moment that breaks you. And women have had that kind of imagination in the 19th century, and that comes out clearly. Now, what would you say about this kind of a situation in the 19th century? That, women felt very insecure. They felt all the time threatened and challenged by somebody or something. They could not even tell what was threatening them, because the structure itself was such that they would not feel at ease with anything that they saw, they witnessed. So this is the point that is made in the 19th century novel very effectively, and this is made by Emily Bronte and Charlotte Bronte, and these two novels both were written incidentally in 1847, and you go to the dates of these two sisters. Emily Bronte is born in 1818, and Charlotte Bronte is 2 years senior to her, and she is born in 1816. Charlotte Bronte lives longer also. She continues till 1855 when she dies, and Emily Bronte dies in 1848, just at the age of 30. And the kind of power that these two people generate in their novels, in conditions of suppression of women, that power is unimaginable today. And 19th century novel, whenever you think about the 19th century English novel, then you would have to think of writers like these, Jane Austen, Emily Bronte, Charlotte Bronte, and many more other writers. So I don't have to go into the details of the writers, but then I tell you that the themes that are pursued in the 19th century are themes of suppression, are themes of fear and apprehension, and that the way the 19th century novel captures these things in very intense terms, that way is unprecedented at that time, and that has not been surpassed by the 20th century writing. So that intensity, that cruelty, and that depth of violence that is there in the 19th century, and at the cost of women's security, that is what attracts our attention in the 19th century novel in the hands of these writers. Then we think of there is one male writer at least, Charles Dickens. He is born in 1812, just in the beginning of the 19th century, and he goes up to 1870, so 58 years he is there as a writer, and he is born in poor surroundings, and he knows about the conditions of the poor people at first hand, but his novels are known for their social criticism, their pathos, their humor, and their humanism. So a great writer. This kind of a writer is difficult to come across earlier or later. Of course, there are great writers in the 18th century England, and there will be great writers in the 20th century also, but it is very difficult to surpass people like Dickens, because his vision, his range, his sympathy for poor people, the people who are illiterate, people who don't have jobs, people who are starving, people who are targets of criticism and cruelty from others, these people find an important place in his writings. So he is a social critic. He is a critic who is sympathetic to the poor, the women, the helpless in society. One more thing about this writer, and that makes 19th century novel stand tall, that is that he is always giving an alternative to the vision that he presents, and the alternative vision is of equality. So there is inequality in life, there is poverty in life, there is exploitation in life. Some people are very rich, others are very poor. Those who are rich, they believe in what is called today utilitarianism. It's a very negative word, that you always look at things from the point of view of utility. What about interest? What about genuine feeling? That is not there. If a thing is not of use, then it is useless. Now let's say that happiness is not very useful in life, because happiness can't sell, and poor people can be happy. What do you do in that situation? So Dickens uses humor to expose the faults and limitations of utilitarianism. He also tells about the density of the rich people. They are so mentally so poor, they are intellectually so ill-equipped, and they can't understand anything except money. So Dickens shows these rich people in a very poor light, and rightly. And since poverty is one of the main problems of England at that time, that poverty may not remain, I don't want to go into that question at the moment, but then poverty may not remain later, but till it is there, that is the chief concern of 19th century novel, and Dickens is in the forefront of that social criticism novels. So I repeat that his novels offer social criticism, and they are pathos, and they are full of pathos. Pathos means feeling of sadness. So you have sympathy with those people, you become sentimental about them because they are helpless. You can't help them, and because their help is not coming from anywhere, so they have to put up with whatever they get. So that pathos is there. Then and it's very difficult, then he is humorous. He finds humor even in the pathetic situations which are full of pathos, because human beings can't be easily suppressed, so they will have their own sense of humor, and that is called the humor of the innocent. The innocent, like sometimes children talk in such a manner that the senior people don't even know how to respond to them. And Dickens is very humorous. He can ridicule the person no end. And then is humanism. He is always sympathetic towards women. He is always sympathetic towards the poor people, the helpless, those who are children particularly. So he is sentimental also, and his sentimentality actually adds verve, it adds strength, it adds appeal to his descriptions. Now one more thing about him, Dickens is one writer in the 19th century novel who gives a lot of importance to characters. So if you start counting characters in Dickens, then it will be difficult to keep tab on them, because there are so many. In a novel you would find 30, 40, 50, 60 people, and all of them are different. And he has picked up these characters from real life. So each character has one's own qualities. The evil characters also have certain qualities which are not palatable to others, but then they are characteristics all the same. So if you have to look at characters in the 19th century, if you want to meet the English people in the villages and in the small towns and even in the big towns in England in the 19th century, then the best way is not to go to a history book, not to go to a film, because there would be no films at that time, and people didn't know what kind of people there were in England at that time. But then Dickens is there. The film medium is not available in the 19th century, but you read his novels and sometimes you feel that you are watching a film, because he captures even gestures of the actions of people, the way they behave, the way they use their hand, the way they use their head, the way they use their eyes, the ways they turn on the left side or on the right side, or the look above or below. He is able to capture. So his characters, character portraits, they are actually word pictures. So you can imagine your own picture with the help of the words that Dickens uses in his novels. And some of his novels are so oppressive in terms of theme that, and he is deliberately making them oppressive thematically, that you realize that is perhaps the center of reality of the 19th century England. The only thing with the Dickens is that he will find hope in the behavior of the characters who are human, and that is his humanism, and that is what is of appeal to us. Then I'll take up one more writer for your consideration, and I'll end the discussion today, and that writer is Thomas Hardy. So let me come to him now. I'm skipping some writers because there are so many in the 19th century, and most of them are novelists, and they are not hampered by things that poets are hampered by in the 19th century. We will take up the poetry of the 19th century at some point of time in a different series, so I am not going into that. But so far as fiction is concerned, then after Dickens, apart from other novelists, there is a person called Thomas Hardy, born in 1840, that is the middle of the 19th century. He will continue into the 20th century. He dies in 1928. So he has seen actually the world around him, let us say from the age of 10 onwards, from 1850 onwards, up to the end of the century and beyond. And what has he seen? This is a question. What was England like in the 19th century? What would appeal in life in England in the 19th century to the writers? Think about this. We generally do not go into these questions. We merely read a play, read a novel, and we make our opinion about that novel and the world that is captured in the novel, and we start discussing one or two aspects of the lives of people presented there, and that is the end of it. But that is not the end of reading literature. You must also know, I must also think about the way these writers contended with, struggled with, the circumstances of the day. And Hardy in particular was in touch with the pains, the sufferings of a whole class of people that will finally disappear. In India, we have today peasantry, and these peasants are busy in the fields. They own land. Sometimes they have to lease out their land. Sometimes they have to take land from others to work on it and part with more than half of the produce, or even still more. That peasantry is there in India. But can you think of a peasant in England at the moment in the 20th century? No. Peasantry disappeared in the 19th century itself. Peasantry's disappearance, there also disappeared a whole lot of attitudes in England in the 19th century. So when peasantry disappeared, when something else took their place, call it capitalism if you like, money is invested in land. People who were there in the towns and in the cities earlier, these people would now go to the countryside. They would buy the land there, and they will own the whole produce, and will start distributing, and the village becomes that way urbanized. Now, urbanization is a good word for us, but it has its sad aspects. If things are urbanized, then the rural people, their simplicity, their innocence, their hardiness, that also goes. And Thomas Hardy at that point of time becomes sad. He is tragic. If one has to think of any tragic writer after Shakespeare in the genuine sense of the term, then one would think of Thomas Hardy. But Thomas Hardy has seen those peasants, who worked hard all their life, and particularly peasant women. One of his novels that I would always keep in mind is Tess. This novel he wrote in 1891. At that time he was 51 years old, and at the age of 51 he takes up a woman called Tess as the heroine, and he shows her sufferings, and she is molested by a person from the landed gentry, and then she falls in love with somebody else. And later on, the other person comes to know that she had an affair with. There was no affair actually. It was just that she was molested, and then the husband came to know about it. The lover came to know about it, and after that he left her. And where should the woman go? And she's a peasant woman. Her mother was a laborer. This woman also worked in the dairy farm, and she didn't know where to go. And she's a sensitive person, and she wants to work hard She wants to live with dignity. She has a sense of honor. And Thomas Hardy gives all his sympathy to the character of Tess. But Tess cannot survive, because anybody who would understand Tess would be a person who is kind enough. And there is no kindness of the kind that Hardy expected from the people, particularly for women of this type. So Tess, a young woman, doesn't get any sympathy, doesn't get any love. She gets only a kind of injustice that crushes her, and Hardy is entirely with her. And he wants that she should live, but he cannot make her live, the conditions being such. The other novel that once again I talk about, there are many novels like this, but I'll just pick up two. The other is The Mayor of Casterbridge. This novel is written 5 years before Tess. And in this novel, there is a person who is a mayor. And this is an ordinary person, but because of his hard work and all, his genius, he becomes a mayor. And after that, he starts losing control over his property. And there is a young man who replaces him gradually. And finally, the mayor is destroyed. So Hardy is all the time taken up with death, destruction, and violence. And this is always at the cost of the labor of the peasantry in the 19th century. So what have we done in this lecture today? We have charted, we have mapped certain aspects of social life in England in the 19th century, and this social life in fact turned the novel into a very strong literary form. It is for this reason that I picked up this topic of 19th century novel, and you will see in it things going in a certain direction, and the direction is capitalism. That it goes from the small town to big town, it goes from the village to the urban areas. If there are women in the small towns and villages, then they are controlled by patriarchy, and that there is oppression, there is injustice, there is violence all around, and that people are seldom happy. If they are happy, then they are happy only at the cost of women, at the cost of the poor people, and that is not the kind of happiness at all. That's a kind of insensitivity. But then lastly I say that the 19th century English novel is strong because it is informed by, it is influenced by recognition of all human beings as humans, and that is at the back of this fiction. And when we read these novels in the subtle sense, what the writers are saying and telling us, then we realize that 19th century English novel offers a lot of emotional and intellectual wealth to us. So with these we come to the conclusion of this. I hope that you would think about these aspects that have been touched upon in this discussion, and we'll take up more such aspects in the lectures that come. Thank you.